All right, hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of convos.dev. I'm Jess, this is Chris, and we basically talk about life and tech and everything in between. We're slightly changing up our format this week. First of all, we're matching, in case no one noticed that. It's
Actually.
And second of all, we're changing up our format to where we each individually bring like an interesting article or blog or piece of content that we've read in the past couple weeks or month, and the other person will teach. Like today, Chris is going to talk to me about something that he's learned, and I'm going to listen. We might have some debate or discussion or questions, and we just thought this would be a good way for us to continue learning, but with each other, both Chris and me, but also with the listeners of this podcast. So without further ado, Chris, you could take it away, and then I'll just interrupt you with questions as we go.
Perfect. Yeah, well, I just texted you the article, and there's actually a video that goes along with it, but it's entitled Apps and Programming to Accidental Tyrannies. It's an MIT talk, and so I'll kind of overview what it's about. It's like he goes through quite a bit, gives a bunch of examples. Like it's fairly, I think it's like 45 minutes the talk. So I doubt I'll be able to capture everything, but it's more like what it inspired in me and less of like the technical details around the talk. But basically the talk is that like there's two kind of cages that we find ourselves trapped in. One is the app model, which traps users like in kind of a one-size-fits-all silo where you get an app and like that's where everything lives. And the other one is like programming as the specialization, where to really make anything you have to technology-wise, you have to be a programmer. And so a lot of our design interfaces, a lot of the ways that we interface with like even the conceptual interfaces are driven by people who think like programmers. And we've since, in the last few decades layered in this idea of UX and design, like because things were so atrociously poor. But even there, a lot of it's been focused on, and some of this is my thinking at this point now, like a lot of that has been focused on shareholder value and like trying to make predictable interfaces instead of thinking like what's the ideal way to actually provide the best experience for a user. And so it's like created these kind of tyrannies is like the title of the talk of apps themselves, or like even just the programming models. And so basically he's exploring how AI in part, but also just the kind of the new world we live in where people are thinking more modularly and can explore ideas too, like allows us to think more imaginatively and creatively, and perhaps even let people who are not programmers by thinking control and interface with a lot of the apps themselves. So that's kind of the overview of the article, the basic pitch for what the talk's about, and I'm happy to jump into more details.
So to summarize, just to make sure I understand, it's like this idea that basically because AI exists and more people can code up their own self-personalized applications, it changes more people's way of thinking. Like if I wasn't a programmer before, I might look at an app and be like, oh, well, I can never change this button or I can never change this interface. And so I would never really think about it. And you're saying like nowadays when people feel like they have the agency to change these things, they start to think like a programmer, or maybe like a UI UX designer or some sort of PM or something like that, where they feel like they can control it because they know they can do it with AI. Is that kind of?
Yeah, I think in part, and then also just the idea that like people who are not fundamentally programmers by training and like by the way they think are now able to kind of bring their ideas to life. So like, for instance, let's say you're just like a artist and you like to paint and you're like, I have this concept for like how this whole interface could be in this thing I want to make. But there's no developer who's going to say like, oh yeah, let me tackle a brand new concept that nobody's ever done before. Like it just doesn't make sense timing wise, and the effort. It's also probably not the way the programmer thinks anyhow. And AI in part, and also I think he's just talking about the shift too in the way people think. I think there's kind of two things there, but it seems like mostly AI allows us to both prototype those ideas and actually let people who aren't traditional programmers or even traditional like UX designers actually come up with some of the fundamental building blocks. And so I think that's kind of the interesting part of it for me, is that it allows us to kind of think of things in brand new ways, instead of merely just like what makes sense efficiency wise and that kind of stuff.
Can you give me an example, like personally for you?
Yeah, so I can give you some examples that he gave as well, which might be helpful. He goes into long, like in depth about Obsidian and like the Markdown editor,
Yeah.
and that's kind of the part where he's like, I think we're thinking more modularly about software, where it's like this composability layer where you can build whatever you want. And so because of that, because it's built on Prosmere, I think it is, like it allows you to kind of come up with all these like random extensions. And so he shows this thing about where he can like read a book, for instance, and he's thinking like, what's the ideal interface for this? Not what's the one that makes sense for like the mass market, what's not the one that is maybe easiest from a technical standpoint, or like most secure, like least error prone from a technical standpoint. And so he's like, what I want to do is be able to read a book and just record myself talking about whatever I'm reading. And so he started with this idea of like, okay, that's the interface I actually want. And so he's like, I'm going to start talking. And I should have mentioned this is by Andy Matuschak. I don't know who that is, but I found the article super interesting. He may be super famous and I just don't know. But so he's like, I'm reading my book and I literally just am talking while I'm doing it. And I'll read a quote. I just say quote, and then he reads the quote, and then he just talks. And then he takes the audio file and uploads it to Obsidian, and it has this custom extension that extracts those quotes. It transcribes the whole thing, extracts those quotes as like specially highlighted things, and then embeds his comments underneath each quote. And he's like, then I thought, well, what if I actually kept the audio? Because the audio sometimes includes like the way I phrase stuff or whatever. It's more than just the words; it's the actual, interface. And so then he has this audio layer, and then he's like, what if I combine the two so that you can kind of click around in the text and actually edit the text, kind of like Descript, but within your own environment. But he's like, the nice thing is because it's audio, I can actually use like, how you can like do I forget what it's called. I've done a video on it in the past, but where you can look up specific text in a blog, for instance, and it has like this highlighted text schema at the end of the URL that will highlight that text and scroll to it on the page. So he's like, we could do that with these books. So now he has something where he's literally just reading, whether it's a textbook or like a printed book or a digital book, and he just talks. How his thoughts. So read a phrase.
His talking annotations, you can click on when he talks about something and it'll jump to that passage of the actual text. Yeah.
And then because it's just Markdown, he can add to it, he can subtract from it, like on his commentary part. Or he can edit the audio and it will actually change the audio, and he can play the audio, or he could just read it. So like that's an interface that doesn't really make sense for a mass market. It's the kind of interface that actually is super useful though, as a reader. Like I just want to talk out my thoughts and then later process what those look like. So that was one example he gave, that he's like, this is a new interface, basically audio to text to ebook, all this combined, that AI has enabled, and it allows us to be more creative than merely like what makes shareholder value or what makes sense functionally to program. So that was a really extended example he gave that was super helpful. That's not mine, which is what you asked for, but that's an example of what he's talking about.
I love that. I'm going to play devil's advocate again. So I agree with all of that. I do think it feels as if there is a subset of people that will think like that and will build extremely useful and personalized software, and will understand exactly what they need and be able to build it. But for me, I feel like, especially because I consume a lot of content on like brain-numbingly stupid platforms, it feels like there's a subset of people who also just build software for the shits and giggles of it, and it leads to extremely stupid software, or software that is simply meant to open eyes or get oohs and ahs and likes. And often it's software that's like, I feel like every time I scroll on TikTok, I get some sort of ad that's like, I was on this hike and I decided to use Cursor to do this thing, or I'm planning my wedding and I needed the seating chart. I'm going to use Cursor to vibe code. And the thing is, I'm sure it's honestly very useful, but because it's like for content, it's probably made with the idea of the brand deal first, and then the software usability and usefulness second. And then even in a personal sense, I feel like I am like a very chaotic archetype of person. Like the best way I can explain it is if you gave me a camera, I would not sit down and like read the manual for like every toggle or button, but I would just use the camera for like 10 years and use it just for how I wanted to use it and not actually learn about like the fundamentals of how this camera worked. And because of that, I feel like a lot of the time I see like when I use AI, I'm not like a high function person, so I don't want to build things like that, if that makes sense. It actually stresses me out because I am not type A or like disciplined enough of a person to kind of want to use that again and again. Even my note taker is very simple. My to-do list is very simple. And so a lot of the time I don't need like super complicated software to do things. Actually, the more it is, like the more I feel like I have to be better of a person to like fit into that. And so a lot of the time when I think about using AI for like things like this, it feels more like this extra little like Lego piece I'm adding on, but it's not like a core function of how I live my day. And maybe I just haven't used it correctly yet. But these types of software is like, I don't feel inclined to build it for myself. But I have friends. I have one friend actually who's like super into AI. I remember he like sent me a page-long text when Fable 5 came out for like one day, and then got revoked.
Actually,
and he was like, I built 3 things with this. Like I reverse engineer my Apple Bluetooth headphones. He was like talking about how he like there's like these Bluetooth scanners where you can like try to hack into different Bluetooth frequencies or something. And he was like, I reverse engineered that with Fable 5 and like was able to build this thing that was able to connect to my music more easily from this software, something like that. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like this feels like software that you would use. I don't know. I'm not going to say there's something wrong with me, but I don't feel excited by like that as because I just don't think I would use a lot of it. So it just feels like throwaway garbage software that's exciting to build, but then I wouldn't use it.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of that where we're trying to kind of figure out where AI coding fits. I think so let me interface with what you said and then also kind of bring back what Andy says here. Like, I think content sometimes ruins a lot of this. So I've been working on this, side project,
of course,
where I'm building out an entire like API, MCP, CLI, like to do application that's all API driven. And so I've been working on it for 3 or 4 weeks now, and it's generally like I'm at a place where it's still causing me more friction than it is helping me, but it's been like this slow iteration that's been really enjoyable to play with, but I'm not ready to talk about it yet. And I think if I wanted to, I could have made a big deal about it, like online and make videos about it and all this stuff. But I'm like, it's not really to a place where it's actually useful yet. It's just kind of a toy. But I do think I'm getting to the point where I'm realizing like, okay, this could actually be fundamentally like a new way of me thinking through how I interface with my to-dos. And it's built on a lot of the system we've talked about already with my OpenClaw. But I kind of went back to the beginning and said like, okay, if I were to build this primarily as a non-UI type system that I could actually trust, what would that look like? What components would it need? It has gardens, of course, and all that. But so anyhow, so that's something where like, I think if I was primarily driven by content, I would have been doing a ton of content on it already, pushing it in where it isn't actually to the point where it's useful yet. It's just more fun to play with. And I think that's okay. AI has enabled me to actually work on it where I probably wouldn't have taken the time otherwise. So that's a few comments about what you said. On his side, I think he's more talking about the prototyping phase and explicitly not talking about finished software.
Got it.
And his point is that a lot of times as programmers in the past, because we know like the amount of technical debt this will cost, the amount of time it will cost, like the estimation for the programming for this concept is just too high to even start with. It naturally scopes our ideas to primarily things that developers say this is worth the time. So that limits our creativity, it limits our imagination, and it doesn't let non-traditional programmers into the space, and it doesn't let non-traditional like ideas into the space. As an example, most everything right now is a chat app, I think because it's the best interface, but because it's the easiest one for people to understand. And like, I think we're starting to see people move beyond just the simple chat, but like to be more imaginative, like there's too much like stakeholder value at play there. Like, but if you could let somebody, instead of making a finished product, just say like, okay, just prototyping, I want to like think way more creatively about my particular space, like music or, you know, whatever. Maybe it can be something technical like accounting or something. And like, what is the ideal way I'd interface with this? Having, he mentions 3 things, which I'm not going to remember off the top of my head, but one of them is like domain specific knowledge. I remember talking to some guy to kind of follow a rabbit trail at Laricon this last year who like did super technical software for oil rigs. And like there was all this detail he had to know.
Him. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, so that's the idea is you have somebody who has really specific knowledge. You have to even build something useful. Then you have to have the technical expertise. And then I forget what his third piece was. But basically the way that we've estimated the cost of even prototyping software has naturally limited the stuff. So like, I'll read just a little bit here. He says, we've spent decades building programs that mostly look like computer science departments with design electives. But we're moving in a world where invention is bottlenecked more on imagination than on technical expertise. So we may have that backwards. We may need programs that look a little bit more like an art school with a technical elective, learning to develop ideas from intuition before being able to express them precisely, to discover by playing with the material. And he goes on to talk about like what that looks like, give some examples of that. But I think like that concept of like allowing myself to play with an idea that may never come to fruition and thinking in like we're at this stage where we can think creatively and like in a new way.
Yeah.
I think of like the automobile, like when they first came up with it, the original concept for a lot of it looked like a horse and carriage where you just had, instead of a horse, an engine, but the system looked the exact same. So they were trying to build, a mechanical horse. And it wasn't until people said, okay, what if we rethought this and said, okay, instead of having like this rain type of idea and using that to control stuff, what if we thought about it fundamentally? Like what would be the ideal interface? And I feel like we're kind of at that stage with AI where we can come at stuff and like we get to build what this new future looks like. And instead of merely saying, let's take the old ways and use AI to do those better and faster, maybe what we can do is to say, instead of speeding up the old ways, maybe we could think of like, what's the ideal way to do this that really wasn't worth the effort before. And that requires kind of a new level of creativity and imagination. And so that's more the vibes he's going after, which it depends how it's implemented, but I like the concept. And I'm like, that's a good place for me to think of like AI, like think more creatively outside of the box, less traditional interfaces as a prototyping mechanism that then we see if it has actual practical use cases in real life scenarios. So that's a bunch.
That makes a lot more sense. Like I think one example that popped to my mind is even just like this. What you said is like, what is the ideal interface for things now that you're not locked into, what a software engineer could do within X amount of weeks within your budget of your company, right? And it's like, okay, even like the way that docs is being written nowadays is like being reimagined because of the way that people tend to interface through like CLI tools or MCP instead of just like reading docs, which like makes sense. And so it's like you're kind of reimagining what docs should look like as a result, which is really interesting. And like an interesting actually story personally is like we were, for our football team, our defensive schema is very dense and hard to understand. And me and my coach were like, we should just vibe code like this like simulation test quiz that we can then just like give to our team and like be like, in this scenario, what would you do? In this scenario, what would you do? And like just have a simulation. It's like, even thinking like that could be possible, knowing that could be possible to vibe code in a day, it's like, okay, we could just go do that. And like, that's not something we would have suggested before. You said like there's a difference in how you think, like even this project that you're building. And I kind of feel the same way because I'm building, like every day, whenever I add like a new skill, it just feels so accomplishing. But then to make sure that those skills are high quality, like I have to think about how I think. And when I do a project, I almost think, once I've completed this project, I think, okay, what is every step that I took along the way to do this project, both in the design part of it and like, I don't know, scaling it up. And I just like sit back at the end of every single thing that I do and be like, okay, could I write a skill or some sort of like thing to capture this so that it gets easier every time? And it's like, it feels as if I'm improving every day, but it's not my brain that's improving. It's like me putting my brain into like Claude Code. And it's like a very fun thing to do because it feels like I'm improving without having to capture it all myself.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the
Like you get the
difference I have.
benefit of the reflection without having to like think through every
I think
like
through it, but like
catalog
having to
everything.
store it in my own head. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right,
like,
right, right.
because I'm not, yeah.
You're not the catalog system too.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
really interesting. And the passage that you read is so well written. Like, it felt very poetic.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, right? I'm going to send you two more articles.
Yeah.
One actually is Mintlify's new landing page. They have this agent score. So you talked about docs changing. And like according to them in June, 50% of all their traffic came from agents.
Yep.
56%, sorry. So I'm like, that's crazy. You know, that needs to change the way we write docs.
Yes.
And then the other one is actually by our founding design engineer, Zeh Fernandes, who's just like such a gifted thinker. I really have always really valued the way he thinks through stuff on like, why is everybody so obsessed with chat interfaces? And
Yeah.
this is some of the same vibes. I almost wanted to share this one, but yeah.
I'll link it in
kind of in that same
the
zone.
yeah, I'll link it in
Yeah.
the video description so people can see it. Okay, we're almost at time. How about we give a quick life update? I'll just cheat a little bit. I know that you were in Brazil. I was in Toronto. So I got this t-shirt
Oh,
here.
nice.
Okay, I'll give a one-liner. Ghana team stayed in my hotel. So that was awesome.
Whoa.
And I went for a conference. On the first day of the conference, the entire building was evacuated due to an emergency. I was still on crutches, so I had to crutch down 6 flights of stairs and held up the entire evacuation. So that's my like little life update. All right, your turn.
Wow, you just got to drop all that and walk out of the room. Okay, cool. I have lots of questions, but yeah, no, Brazil was great. We went to Rio with the team. We were right on Copacabana Beach, which was really nice to be
Wow.
able to just go out and like play volleyball and, you know, that kind of stuff. But most of it was chatting through stuff with the company and got to meet a lot of new people at Recent, which was really fun. Since we're all remote, I think I was the 10th hire and we just hired 47, something like that. And like
Wow.
20 people I had never met. So that was really fun. So that was that. And then I actually came back and ran a soccer camp, which I do every summer
Right.
for kids. We had like 150 kids. That was really fun. I got sick, so I was sick running the camp, but had a lot of fun with that. And then straight into World Cup. I know I'm just wearing a Liverpool jersey,
Yeah.
but you know, that's what I like. So
Yeah, that's awesome. We'll talk about that in the next episode. I want to know more about the World Cup fandom because I don't follow it.
we
Okay,
should do it.
that wraps up this episode of convos.dev. As always, please leave us a comment or feedback and find us on socials or our website. But thanks for chatting through all of this, Chris. See ya.
Yep. Thanks so much. See ya.